them. But now they go into another lengthy waiting period, depending on the size of the property. But the owner must wait at least, and it looks to be about an average of 60 days for the tenant to get together their financing and get together everything they need to purchase the property. In larger properties, multi-unit properties, it can be up to 6 months of time to gather that financing. The other thing that could happen is the owner could reject the offer. And if they reject the offer, then what happens is the owner does have a right to go out to the regular market to list the property. And this would be the first time in the process that they would be allowed to go out to the open market. However, whatever offer comes back to the owner from the open market, the owner has to go back to the tenant group or back to the nonprofit and say, hey, I got this offer, can you meet or beat it? And then another waiting period sets in at that point, anywhere from 20 to 30 days for the tenant group or the nonprofit to act on that. So it's a very lengthy process in which most standard buyers in an open market, especially investment income buyers, are not going to wait around for all these various time periods to expire.
That seems to misunderstand that in a world with interest rates that move, markets that change constantly, adding 6 months as I add these things up, you can get up to 9 months or more worth of delay in a changing market. Someone's retirement could be at risk as they're waiting to navigate this situation. Derek, did we see that in other places where this has played out?
Yeah, what's interesting about this is that in other places is interesting, right? Because I think if we look at Washington, D.C. as a starting place, and we look at the attempts and efforts, even in our backyards across Alameda County, it's clear that people are scrutinizing the return on investment in implementing programs, and they're seeing that they're fraught with all sorts of difficulty. I think administratively, one area, San Francisco has its flavor of TOPA, and that's COPA. But I think what we are seeing is that there's a high cost of administration in developing and managing, maintaining these programs. And I think municipalities have to ask themselves, is it worth investing in programs like TOPA or COPA? And will we get the return on investment, right? Because usually what happens is that the development, the implementation is usually underestimated, cost these municipalities much more money than they expect, and they need many more resources to maintain these systems. And I think that's what Washington, D.C. discovered over the years, is that how many transactions have occurred under TOPA in 40 years, and juxtapose that against what was the cost in creating and maintaining the system. And I think they've realized that the ROI just isn't there.
So in Sacramento, you've engaged some of the top lobbyists in town to explain the issue, and you've managed to hold it at bay at the state level. But that seems to have generated some activity when they couldn't get it at the state level, that it's going on in the local level and hitting you. What are you doing at the local level? What are you seeing, and what are you doing?
This is the area that we really coalesce on when it comes to the various trade associations. And this is where Derek and I have really worked together very closely, along with various property owners and members of our associations, to fight the policy. I think one of the things that we have a greatest concern on in this policy is the impact on the ultimate sales price. The proponents of this policy will tell you that, oh, the owner gets to choose the asking price for the property. And that is true. They have built that in there. They have not limited that ability. However, we all who are in real estate, especially the transactional side, understand that the value of real estate is really at any given point in time. And there's so many things that can impact that final sales price. And many times time is something that impacts that final sales price. So for us, we've seen this as a way in which the nonprofits are trying to gain an edge on a very competitive market, that of California, where land values are high, cash is king, and it is difficult to get an offer through, especially for nonprofits who get a lot of their funding from federal grants, from state grants, where government funds are very slow to come through. So to be able to act on a purchase as quickly as the market normally plays out, it's very difficult for them. So this gives them that kind of leg up that no other buyer essentially would have except for them. So that impact has created a really good reason for our organizations to gather in a coalition and work our way through these different cities to tell the stories of small owners and the impact this will have on them. And Derek can speak to the impact that we really drilled down on, which we think is most concerning, and that is for our BIPOC communities, our Black and Brown communities who have been named when it's come to trying to purchase property in the states, in the United States, as well as California, and the impact of the generational wealth that has been built through that property ownership over the years.
Yeah, and to add on to that, so especially in this is really interesting on the nonprofit side. So what we can see, again, going back to Washington, D.C., because that's the city that has tried to make this program work for the longest period of time, what we likely see is that savvy new investors and well-funded nonprofits enter into these targeted communities, and with unkept promises, they try to take advantage of tenants by ultimately raising rents or refusing to make the necessary repairs. And additionally, tenants may be pressured to accept unfair terms. And all of these things happen after the transaction occurs. And so new owners try to exploit or engage in these loophole maneuvers to move in to acquire property, right? But then